Where did human civilization begin? What are human origins? And who are our ancestors? Well, if these questions have ever intrigued you, then you have found the right show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first episode of the History of Mankind, a show where we discuss the major happenings in history which shaped modern society. Now, before we begin, here's a quick note. This series and its data is largely based off of the history of the world by Plantagenet Somerset Fry. But before we begin, let's have a look at a few terms which we must be familiar with when studying history. The first word is BCE or before Christ era, which is the era that lasted before the birth of Jesus Christ. The second is Anno Domini or Common Era, which is the era which we all live in. And the third and most important term is Hominid, which is kind of a collective term used to refer to humans and our ancestors. So now, I want you to imagine something. Imagine a piece of paper. But not just any piece of paper, this one is 80 kilometers in length. Now, draw a line that is about 10 centimeters on this humongous piece of paper. There you have it, history and human history. Thank you, see you next episode. Don't worry, I'm just kidding. But yes, we truly did visualize history and human history with this illustration. The 80-kilometer long paper of ours is history in general, which spans about 10,000 million years, which includes everything from primitive animals to modern day humans. And the 10 centimeter line was just human history, which is 3 million years, which may not seem too short, but trust me when I say it, that we have been on this planet for a very, and I mean very short amount of time. So, what was the first human or human-like creature to have ever existed? It was called the Ramapithecus. But first, time for etymology. The word Ramapithecus is made up of two other words. The first one of these is Rama, based off of Lord Rama from the Hindu mythology. It was named so because the scientists just fancy naming things after Hindu deities, like the Ramapithecus, then there was the Sugriva-Pithecus, etc. The second word is Pithecus, which is an anglicized form of the word Pithekos, which means ape in Greek. The Ramapithecus survived extremely harsh climatic conditions and survived the wrath of deadly creatures. So you could say it was somewhat of a superhero. And do you know what all superheroes have in common? An origin story. The Ramapithecus' existence first became familiar when Dr. Edward Lewis discovered its first fossil fragments in the year 1932 in the Shivalik Hills of northern India. Yet, it was like an unsolved puzzle, as they were just fragments. I mean, really, who would work with just 8 bone fragments and try to piece them together and derive a conclusion out of it? Well, Elwin Simons did. Elwin who? Elwin Simons, this person. From what we know of him, he was probably great at puzzles because that is what he had to solve all throughout his career. What made this new skull interesting, however, was the fact that it was different. Very different from the modern day human and our skull. So, based on the morphology of such a skull, Elwin Simons was able to draw a conclusion that this creature was the perfect transition between primitive apes and modern humans. Now you could say the Ramapithecus was somewhat similar to the modern day human because it too had its own nickname. It has the nickname of Shivapithecus, which quite literally means the ape of Lord Shiva. It is called so because its first remains were discovered in the Shivalik Hills of northern India, which is known to be the home of Lord Shiva. Now, about 3 to 3.5 million years ago, the Ramapithecus slowly started to fade away. Yet, don't worry, because the Ramapithecus evolved into 2 sibling species. The first one of these was the Australopithecus. Oh, and by the way, it has nothing to do with Australia. Different story, we'll cover that later. The word Australopithecus is again made up of two words. The first being Australo, which means south or southern. The second being Pithecus, which, just like earlier, means ape or orangutan. This tells us that the word Australopithecus means the ape of the south or southern ape. Now, keep in mind that Australia was most probably named so because of the same word, which is Australo, meaning south or southern. And it kind of makes sense because Australia lies in the southern hemisphere of the earth. So, historically or geographically, the Australopithecus is in no way related to Australia. But when you look at it from a vocabulary standpoint, it is. Now, back to the Australopithecus. It had two varieties, the Africanus and the Boisei. The Australopithecus africanus originates from, you guessed it, the land of culture, tradition, some of the best wildlife, and weird colonial borders, Africa. Now, the Boisei did not have any origin story, but it was once nicknamed the Nutcracker Man. Not this one, this one. It was named so because of its humongous teeth. Now, keep in mind that although the Australopithecus does evolve from the Ramapithecus just like all of us, it isn't directly ancestrally linked to the modern human. Consider it to be a second cousin of some sort, but the second cousin that went extinct way before you were even born. The hominid from which we evolved is called the Homo habilis. The word Homo habilis can be split up into two words, the first one of them being Homo, which means human, just the same as in hominid. The second word is habilis, which means skilled. This tells us that the Homo habilis was the skilled human. But hey, why do we call it skilled? Did it have the ability to use super advanced computer technology to create simple animations for YouTube videos? Well, maybe it's got something to do with the origin story. Our story begins in 1961 when Louis Leakey and Mary Leakey discovered what seemed to be a new creature in the form of fossil fragments in the Olduvai Gorge of Tanzania. Now, about a decade later, Leakey's son, Richard Leakey, managed to find a few more fossils, again in Tanzania. But these ones were up for analysis. The 1470 man, as it was named in the Tanzanian Museum's National Catalogue, was found with few stone tools which seemed to be half finished and a few other pebbles. Hence, it was concluded that the Homo habilis was skilled, hence its name habilis. Now, although the Homo habilis was skilled, it wasn't intelligent. In fact, it couldn't even make its own fire. So dumb, it could have literally used a matchstick. But coming back, it was different from us even in a biological way. It had massive teeth, a less compact brain, and the most important of all, a feature that would become an evolutionary trait, that is, an erect spine. The Homo habilis evolved into the Homo erectus. Now, if you're wondering, what does this word erectus mean? Number one, really? And number two, it obviously has a very, very complicated philosophical meaning, and it means erect. The first remains of the Homo erectus were discovered in the island of Java in Indonesia when it was still a Dutch colony. Later, a few more remains were discovered in Peking, China. Hence, the creature was named the Peking Man. The Homo erectus should have been extremely proud with itself because it evolved a lot. It had a much more compact brain, smaller teeth, and as its name suggests, an erect spine. And intellectually speaking, it might, just might have been the first species to ever use fire. Still no matchsticks though. Before we move on, it is important to mention one thing. Branches. Not these ones, these ones. Basically, when evolution happens, it doesn't happen uniformly. By which I mean that not all species evolve in the same way, resulting in the creation of branches. consider it to be like a family tree with second and third cousins. One such branch of the Homo erectus was the ever intellectual Neanderthal species, literally called so because their fossils were first discovered in Neander Valley in Germany. The Neanderthals, in spite of their extreme intellectuality and ability, went extinct very quick, and I mean 35,000 BCE quick. Some claim that it was due to the lack or competition for resources, while others claim that interbreeding was a major cause for their extinction. But deep down, we all know it's because they didn't invent matchsticks. And finally, the most important evolution of the Homo erectus led to the creation of